And we're up on YouTube right now.
All right, as soon as the mayor comes in, and we'll have a quorum and then we can get started.
The mayor's here, Councilmember
Oh, he's
Mitchell.
there? Okay, there he is. There he is. Okay, I would like to call. I'm sorry I was late coming up. I was running around doing some other things too and on the east side, so just trying to get some things together. But anyway, I'd like to call the Special Community Development Committee to order. And the time is now approximately 4:33. And I'm gonna ask us, we just bow our head for a short invocation. Amen. Then we're gonna move on into the minutes. If I get someone to make a motion to approve the minutes of August 27th, 2020.
I move for approval.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's moving second. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposers, nay. On opposers. So I'm gonna kind of skip over item B, which is under the old business, and go down to new business. And Ms. Johnson, were you going to be taking that over under new business? The TD Bank Housing and.
Yes, sir. I am going to ask Andrea Jones to present that item to you and ask for your approval of that. Andrea, would you present that information to the mayor and the members of council?
Good afternoon, council member, mayor, and city council members. So we recently learned of an opportunity that TD Bank is releasing grant applications for their Housing for Everyone competition. And this year's theme is COVID relief, which is basically them providing grant funds for rental and mortgage assistance, along with case management or supportive services. And we've decided to partner with Humanities Foundation, one of our longtime partners, and also the Palmetto Community Action Partnership, also another nonprofit. And we will be applying for the full amount of $250,000 for this grant. So we will be partnering with them. If we are awarded this funding, we're estimating over 200 families will be assisted. So the grant application is due at the end of this month on October 30th. So we're working on pulling that together. And they will let us know by either February or March of next year of 2021 on whether or not we were awarded funding.
Thank you for the information. If anyone have any questions?
I move for approval if we need to take a vote on this.
We do.
Yes, we need to take a vote on it. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was moving second. Do we have any questions? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposers? Okay, we'll move on down to the next item. Is the resolution to certify the billing for abandoned building tax credit.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
that item is deferred.
Okay.
McQueenie asked that that one be deferred until the next meeting of the City Committee of City Council.
Okay.
Our next item would be a review of the Cooper River Bridge redevelopment area TIF instead of the East Side TIF, as is on your agenda.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 3.
Okay, I think this was added at my request, and it was somewhat in anticipation of our long discussions that we've had about the smokestacks on the east side, given that if there was a possibility for funding their full preservation, the only logical source that I knew of was this TIF district. So I wanted to just review, and for all of our TIF district allocations to date, since I've been mayor, that I recall at least, I always try to bring those to Community Development Committee first, before asking council's approval in full. I'm frankly not asking for any action today. I just wanted to bring to everyone's kind of attention where we stood with prior allocations that have been made, and with the announcement yesterday from Ms. Wharton that she believed we had the capacity next year to issue an additional $10 to $12 million on the Cooper River Bridge TIF, to show you, the list of prospects that just staff has come up with so far. And it might be a little early to be sharing a list like this because we really haven't completely vetted it with neighborhoods and with council. So this is just a very preliminary list in order to give council an idea of all the things that at least staff has been thinking of. So I think, Gianna, you had that written list that you sent me. Let me see.
Yes, sir.
If
And Andrea could pull it up for you, Mayor, if you don't have it.
yeah, if she could pull that up, that would be nice. And then I saw Alan Davis on the call a minute ago. So we saw this list not too long ago because of our allocation of $150,000 to the low line. But in general terms, council has allocated about a fourth of the initial bond offering, or a little over $3 million, to various affordable housing initiatives and efforts that came along. Some of them like undergrounding utilities, some environmental remediation we needed to do, and so forth. Then the next big item is drainage and stormwater. We allocated almost $5 million to various projects. A good bit of this has not been spent yet because we are just having AECOM now do the Cooper River Drainage Basin study, and that will lead to recommendations for definitive projects that have to be engineered and then priced out. So that $2.9 million, which is a good part of this allocation, is sitting there and probably won't get spent for another year. But we know we have issues, and we know, frankly, they're going to cost more than $2.9 million. So these funds are very needed for drainage and stormwater. Next, we had pedestrian safety improvements. We made an adjustment to those recently because the cost for the Brigade Street Bikeway came down significantly. And we're working on some improvements along Morrison Drive, along where Sanders Clyde is. And then the other biggest item was, in fact, the St. Julian Divine Revitalization. We had put $2.3 million to that. And we got some other parks and playgrounds things we're doing. The total proceeds were 11.9 after you allow for some costs. So we do have $310,000 not allocated from all of that. So then, Alan, are you on the line? Can you share that map, those maps you showed me earlier today?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I'll just need control of the screen.
Okay. Does this allow you to, there we go.
So this is a map of the current allocation that the mayor just reviewed.
So I just reviewed the more detailed text version of what we would call our current allocation. This lists them and shows them nicely on the map. The little orange area is oddly shaped, but that's the actual TIF district. And I guess the blue areas are two different drainage basins within that comprise the district that we're having AECom do the study currently to help define some projects. So any questions about what's on the table right now? I see Councilmember Jackson's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm curious, well, first of all, maybe I missed what you said. So is the 11 million that I know that we already looked at a while back, that money has already been bonded, or is that money that is still to be bonded?
It was bonded. The money's
Right.
in the bank. We've been spending some of it already.
Right.
And it's, other than 300 grand, it's all been assigned, allocated loosely to these projects. Now, some of them may cost a little less or a little more than what we allocated, but
Right.
there's a loose allocation of the funds to these various projects.
Okay. And so what we were talking about yesterday was a new bond for next year, for 2021, that would create another 10 to 12 million.
That's correct. Apparently, the development that's already occurred just in the last 2 years, it's been finished. The information that Amy got from the county showing the status of the district indicates that we could go ahead next year and borrow another 10 or 12 million on this district.
Okay, so then I have two questions about that, please. So are the staff combination of housing and drainage, are they working on a game plan for how to spend that 10 million? And
So,
is low line included in that?
Yes.
So Alan, if you'd show the next map.
Well, while you're doing that, then can I ask, so under the current numbers of the East Cooper drainage, is that part of where the land swap has been proposed between Humanities Foundation and the city that we saw about 2 months ago with Ms. Doran and?
Not specifically. I mean, the land swap, it's kind of a different matter. If it worked out, you really don't need any cash. You're trading land for land, right? So, but if you needed to buy those lots separately, they would be for a drainage solution. You certainly could use those drainage funds for that purpose.
Right, but what I'm trying to get at, so what has already been budgeted here under the almost 3 million for East Cooper River drainage, that doesn't include the solution that the land swap would entertain, where we would create more of a holding the Dutch dialogue solution to that part of East Side. Right, that would be new money and a new plan. Am I right about that?
Yeah, like I was trying to tell you, there's $2.9 million for projects that will come out of the AECom recommendations, and it may include that Dutch dialogue style project. 2.9 million won't be nearly enough to do it all, but we're kind of sitting on it, waiting for the project to come forward, if you will.
Phasing it. Okay, all right. I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row in terms of what tranche of, bond funds are going to cover the basic building blocks.
Anyone else have any questions for the mayor before we proceed? All right, Mr. Mayor, you can go ahead and proceed.
So again, this is just some recommendations from staff, and you can see the list is pretty long, and I don't know that we want to go through each and every one. Of course, one of the items, though, is number 3, the St. Julian Divine Center smokestacks. So if you went to the preservation of the stacks, basically, based upon the numbers we were talking about yesterday, with 800,000 still being left in the project budget, you would need to kind of mentally allocate and truly allocate 2 million of the 10 to 12 possible for next year in order to do that. And then you got all these other things, including, I know we're going to have a request coming soon from our dear friends at the Low Line for 20 and 21 and 22 being the first phase of building a park, a new park, the Lowline Park. That would be in the area behind what used to be the Butcher and Bee. They moved, but I still think of them as being there. You know, and so that will be significant, along with, you know, all these other ideas for improvements with sidewalks, bikeways, more general stormwater improvements, and so forth. So there are a lot of needs out there. I can guarantee you that if estimates were put on all those things, it'd be a heck of a lot more than 10 or $12 million. But I just wanted to give council, you know, a flavor of what's out there. I mean, the good news, y'all, is that we will have 10 or $12 million to allocate for some good stuff. I mean, in this Corona budget era where we've got shortfalls and we're cutting, it's a real blessing to have some funds available to do some community work. And I feel great about that. But having said that, we have priorities we'll have to make and decisions to make. Do we want to really focus on getting the low line started? You know, we can dedicate some more money to affordable housing, and we'll probably need to once 16 and 17 come along. I mean, that area of future development of those last parcels that we have right next to the South Carolina State facility and right across from the MLK pool. So anyway, there's a lot of great things we can do. The good news is we'll have some resources, you know, but the understanding is we'll probably never have all we would like.
Sorry.
Anybody else have any questions?
I just have one other follow on to the mayor, but I can go last.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Jackson, you go ahead.
On the good news, many blessings side of things, Mayor. I did follow up because I knew that I harangued you yesterday at the council work session in response to the information that the Historic Charleston Foundation put forward to us, and basically it was coming from the low line side of that research, I guess. So now I know that it's not a study or an analysis that the city has paid for, but it was done by the gentleman that we do use. I've forgotten his name, but the gentleman who represents MuniCap that tries to project proceeds from TIFs. And so I think, you know, what we're looking at right now is the next year, which is great. But I do feel like at some point the city should be agreeing or at least confirming with the MuniCap study that would say that the TIF is going to continue to produce revenue based on the 8 projects that this gentleman was paid to look at by the low line directors, so that we're not wishful thinking. We're literally looking at projects that are either already completed or the last one is they broke ground and they're clearing their site or whatever they're doing, site demolition. So that to me is fabulous news. We can't really, you know, plan on it to the every last penny, but certainly to the extent that we are trusting the hard and fast evaluations of smart people like the MuniCap advisors, I do think that might be something that we should continue to follow and get more serious about. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and my thing is, Mr. Mayor, I just always say we have to look at our priorities. And our priorities is what we're going to do really for the community to make them safe and make them better so we can elevate ourselves on to future things, because the future is coming and we know it's there. So we have to be sure that we are moving toward the future. And that's all I'm looking, you know, trying to be transparent with that and hope that the community and the people would understand what we are trying to do, not knocking anyone, but still moving forward. And so that's another thing. And we know that we are projecting these monies for the TIF. We're projecting money here, but this shit, we don't know what might happen later on either, you know. So we're trying to do the best we can with what we have now, and hope and pray projection might come forth of what we're expecting, so to speak, because you don't know sometimes. So if anyone else have any questions? Councilman Appel, I know you usually have a question.
You know, I'm good on this one. This is everything looks great to me.
Okay. All right, we can move right up. If no one else have a question,
Councilman
we can
Ware
move
has his hand up.
Councilman Ware, I didn't see it. I can't. You have a question?
Yeah, I do. I just, again, just kind of in light of what we're going through now financially, I just wondered, I mean, if we should revisit this, I mean, from the standpoint of, just briefly, Mr. Mayor, when it comes to stormwater maintenance, you know, we are really, we're doing a good job, but we certainly can use more. When I mean maintenance, just cleaning out pipes, cleaning out ditches, drainages, that kind of thing. I'm just wondering, I don't think Amy is is Amy on this call? I don't think she's on this
No,
meeting.
I don't believe so.
But maybe it's a
I don't
question.
think so.
How much maintenance, if it's done in a TIF district, how much maintenance labor could be assigned to a TIF district and come out of TIF funding? I think that's a question we need to get answered, obviously, which is not proposed in a bond. And then the second thing, when we do issue a bond from a TIF, does the payment on that bond come from TIF proceeds or from general funds?
That answer I know, it comes from the TIF proceeds.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to just kind of make sure on that one. But I'm just wondering if some of our maintenance that's coming out of either stormwater funds or in some cases general funds, if they're assigned to certain TIF districts, can some of that be apportioned to pay for that? Because, you know, we saw the rain bomb that came through recently and people sloshing through germ-infested water. This is the second time for Mr. Mayor, but I just happen to have my one-on-one today with the mayor. But, you know, for going back 25 years, the city's done a great job. And remember, the sea level wasn't as high as it is today 25 years ago. We did a great job building vertical things that we all enjoy. You know, Riley Park, the gallery down at Waterfront Park, et cetera, et cetera. And the infrastructure, you know, was falling in on us under the city. You know, the drainage pipes, obviously ditches in the outlying area, needing of larger pipes. So the focus of spending on that maintenance or spending on that upkeep, the city's finances was hugely skewed in a different direction. So one of the things that is the good part about getting the funds from the governor and the help me out, Mr. Mayor, the bank, the
STIB, they call it now.
the STIB, right? That's right. The STIB. You know, we had voted as a council Councilman Ross, prior to you coming on, because we were at wit's ends on how to finish, obviously, September Clark Spring Fishburne drainage project. We actually voted to commit 5 years of stormwater drainage funds to finish what is now basically a $200 million project. Well, now we've got that which means no money for your district, very little money for my district that I represent, Carroll's district, and everybody outside the peninsula. We've been given a wonderful opportunity with these dollars now that when things can be paid for example, Councilman Mitchell, and I know we may be on the other side of this one, but you know, $3 million for a smokestack versus $3 million to help fund drainage right here in this district that people are sloshing through every time we have a rain bomb. I got to go with trying to fix the drainage. And I understand that one. You know? But that said, we didn't have that mindset when we came up with this spending plan right here. So I'm just kind of wondering, can we make some reassessments with drainage, and if we can squeeze some maintenance and labor that would normally come out of the stormwater fund, can that come out of the some of it come out of these TIF areas, which would allow more monies from stormwater to go to the remainder of the city, areas west of the peninsula, James Island, Johns Island, West Ashley, and the like. And I don't think we've ever looked at it in that light. So I just want to throw that out.
I see. I was going to call on Chip, and he's raising his hand. So Chip, and it's a perfect time to investigate because, you know, AECOM did recommend us go ahead and clean out a certain area of this drainage basin. And so I think we're spending an extra couple of $100 grand right now on maintenance in this district. So Chip, the question would be, per Councilmember Waring, if that's a $200,000 expense just for that extra maintenance, could we use TIF funds for that?
So the answer is sort of, it depends, and I need to check on the difference between maintenance and capital projects. The number one limiting factor, and think about it this way, Councilmember Waring, especially with bonds, you know, their security is the increment of the development that's going to occur. So the money from those bonds and the money from the TIF in general has to go to things which benefit, they can benefit the public too, but it has to help ensure that that development occurs. So you could probably use it for certain things that are going to benefit the development and the public in general. But my understanding is it's more difficult, especially geographically, the further away you get. So if you're talking about a project, James Island, certainly that's, you know, from Peninsula funds that would be.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is normally if some of these stormwater folk, let's say all the stormwater folks will make it simple, as paid out of the stormwater fund, you know, proceeds, okay? But they're doing work cleaning out this drainage basin right here, just like what the mayor's talking about. In this case, is isolated. This 200,000 is being paid for in this TIF district. Can that labor be paid for out of that TIF funding? It was for that TIF district because obviously if drainage works more efficient because the pipes are clean, or even I know when we do infrastructure, put in larger pipes and all of that in the district, TIF funds can use for that. But some of this ongoing maintenance that's right now being paid for out of one pocket, some of it, not all, but some of it, I think can be apportioned. For example, how many TIF districts we have on the peninsula? About 4 that's still active. I think let's say we have 4 that's still active. I know one of them, one time we had 5.
There's 5 still.
It's still 5. Okay, so anytime we get stormwater people cleaning out a basin or whatever in a particular TIF district, why can't that labor be paid for out of that TIF revenue? Just that pro rata share. Now, I'm not talking the annual salary. I know it takes a little bit more accounting, but if it doesn't come out of the stormwater proceeds and can come out of the TIF district, that leaves more money in the stormwater proceeds that can be spent across the larger geographical area of the city.
Yes, sir.
So see,
yes,
what I mean.
My main question, and with specifics, I would almost always ask Charlton because that's his specialty. But my question would essentially be maintenance versus capital improvements, because I think what you're describing could certainly be tied to benefit the development of properties within the TIF, because that's what bondholders are going to worry about, because they're not recourse against the city, it's recourse against the TIF. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the big question for me is maintenance versus capital projects. And I'm happy to run that by Charlton and get his opinion on especially specifics like that. I think it's
thank you.
Jim,
I know Councilman Sacrum has his hands up.
Okay.
I want to get him before we go any further. Councilman Sacrum?
Thank you, Chairman. I had my hand up, but Councilman Waring answered my question. I was just,
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
he answered my question. Thank you.
All righty.
I just have a follow along for Mr. McQueenie, if he's going to be consulting Charlton, or the mayor will be. Can we also ask him about the preservation of the smokestacks? Would that be considered public, the collateralization of improvements? Because I've been wondering that question as we've been talking about it. It's a pure preservation use. So as long as we're going to talk to him, can we ask him that?
I'll be happy to. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any other questions, Mr. Mayor?
I would just also point out, Chip, and that this particular district doesn't have any development agreements with anyone. Unfortunately, Councilman Waring, of those 5 other districts, West Edge and Magnolia are almost completely tied up with development agreements. This one is not. So I don't think that we're have to tie our project to any specific development in the area. If we choose public infrastructure to the overall benefit of this district, I think council is free to spend the money like we want to.
Any property within the district that would contribute to the increment.
Correct.
Right. Yes, sir.
Great.
All right. Any other questions? Councilman Gregory, you have any questions?
Is that a fountain back there, Councilmember Gregory?
Yes.
That is nice.
Thank you.
You have any questions, Councilman Gregory?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. We're moving right along. Anyone else have any questions? We can move right along. I must make sure I get everyone. Okay, we can move on down to number 3. Review amendments of the East Side TIF. That's for reward allocation. Then we have number 4, discussion, review of the minimum parking requirements for the commercial corridors. I think we have that. Number 4, under the new business.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Appel has his hand up.
Okay, who's going to be explaining that? I don't know.
Councilmember Appel.
That's what Councilman Appel is putting on the agenda. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the item that I put on the agenda regarding, a review of our minimum parking requirements for defined commercial corridors on the peninsula. This is a bit of a passion project for me. It's something that is, what I consider to be some pretty low-hanging fruit in a orchard of zoning reform ideas that I'm interested in pursuing over the coming months and years. And there's certainly, I'm not sure if Jacob's on right now, but this is also something that, our zoning staff may have some comments on, at the appropriate time. But here's the bottom line. We have a lot of vacancies on King Street right now, obviously. Before COVID, we had small businesses struggling on King Street, as we all know. I mean, for a long time, more and more of the storefronts on King Street have been occupied by national brands, really as billboards, right? Given the tremendous foot traffic that we used to experience on King Street not too long ago, before the tourists, were reduced due to the pandemic. And when I see these vacancies, when I see these non-activated second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth stories along King Street, I ask the question, why? Why aren't we activating to its full capacity these properties? Why don't we have more small businesses occupying and activating these properties? And there's a lot of reasons for it. It's not just minimum parking requirements, but minimum parking requirements are an important one. Right now, if me and a friend wanted to open up a restaurant, say in front of the Apple Store where King Street Grill used to be, as just for an example, during the entitlement process, we would have to go to Lee Batchelder or somebody else in the planning and zoning department and demonstrate to them how we are meeting the zoning code's minimum parking requirements. In other words, you have to come forward and show to the city that you can meet certain prescribed parking requirements based upon the type of use you have, the size of the use, et cetera. And the reality of it is, for these already built structures on King Street where the building occupies the entire lot, there is no parking. There just is no parking. So what folks have had to do over the years is one of several things: purchase parking spaces within a defined geography of the location, lease parking spots, or more often the case, go before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I sat on for years, and request either a variance or a special exception. There's two different kind of tests in our zoning ordinance based upon some technical requirements, but that can take several months. It provides an opportunity for the people in the public to come out and kill it, by opposing it, saying they don't want this open for X, Y, and Z. My philosophy, and it's not just, my personal views on this, most of the cities in the country with commercial corridors have looked at this issue and eliminated minimum parking requirements out of the theory that, look, it's a downtown busy commercial core. There is no parking, or it's too expensive for parking. So essentially, the governments have adopted the position and the policy of allowing the market to solve that problem, right? I mean, there's always going to be our garages. There's on-street parking. There's all kinds of other opportunities, but we don't make it a governmental requirement to do it. We let the market handle this. And I believe, and I've talked with folks at Low Country Local First. I've talked with the folks at the Central Business Improvement District Commission. When I mentioned this the other day, and let me tell you, we don't agree on everything in that group. There was widespread support for this idea. And again, it just makes it easier for businesses to open up. It makes, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it removes an expensive, costly, uncertain step in the entitlement process. Now, I don't think or suggest that we just, take it from 0 to 100 overnight. I think we should, if we were to remove these minimum parking requirements, I think we ought to start with like a pilot project where we define a very, prescribed area. I think we start with King Street, perhaps from Calhoun to say Market, right? Where we've really got some problems. I'm standing above the William Sonoma right now. And let me tell you, we need to make King Street great again. It's struggling right now. And we maybe look at that. We exempt from this exemption. I'm talking about accommodations uses, late night uses, and new construction, which in speaking with Mayor Tecklenburg, he brought that idea up. In other words, if you build some new building, you got to park it. But for existing buildings that have been around, since like Teddy Roosevelt was alive, right, that doesn't have parking on the streets, if somebody wants to put some condos on the second and third floor, we just let them do it without the parking. They got to meet all kinds of other code requirements. We just let them do it. And let's see what happens. Let's study it. Let's get in line with the other cities that have done this. I think it's very easy for us to put together an ordinance that would accomplish this. We've already got a section in our code that provides for exceptions for off-street parking. We need to just add a subsection to that ordinance that just designates certain commercial corridors for this exception. We put language in there that makes it so you don't do accommodations uses, late night uses, or new construction without providing parking. But we allow these properties to be activated, and I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And like every other ordinance that we do, we can evaluate it, we can study it, and go from there. So that's the idea. I think that as we hopefully turn the corner on COVID, I hope we're getting to that point. We can start proactively thinking about ways that we can, lay the foundation for an economic renaissance here in Charleston and a revitalization of of our properties here, especially along the commercial corridors, because they're struggling right now, and we need to come up with ways to make it easier for folks. And sometimes that means, deregulating, getting out of the way, making business less expensive, less costly, and less unpredictable for small businesses. So that's my spiel. I'm getting off my soapbox now, but if anyone has any questions or want to talk about this some more, I'd love to talk about this, but my hope would be we could maybe get an ordinance drafted up and sent through the proper channels, maybe bring it back to CD, then go through Planning Commission, and y'all know the rest of the story. Thanks.
Okay, I have a comment. That'll be fine, but the thing is that when you do that, and if they're closer to proximity to a neighborhood, we ran into that problem before, and that's when the neighborhood came out and said all the people are parking in their community, and I got beat up on that because a lot of that was in the area that I represent so far as Ratcliffe Borough, Elliott Borough, Cannon Borough, and places like that, and that's why I think these things were put in place because of that. Because when you have it open that way, then people are going to park all over the place, and then the people in the community are going to be running crazy. So how are you going to balance that? I don't know. It's a good suggestion, if you may. So you can take that up and take that suggestion up. You can go and do a pilot search or whatever the case may be. But we got to be mindful, very mindful of the people in the community also, even with the businesses there. And I know they're struggling, and we have to do whatever we can do to help them. But you have to be very mindful of those community that's budding those particular areas. And when people come and they're going to park all in the community, and then we're going to have a problem. We'll have another problem again, because we ran into that before a couple of years ago. And that's why these ordinances and things were put in place because of that, because the community came out strong and say, hey, we like the businesses, but they're parking all over in our community. We can't park ourselves. We can't get in our area. We can't get into this. So I don't know how you'll be able to balance that, but that's something we can take a look at, because I'm also listening to the community, the Central Business District. Also, I listen to them wholeheartedly because I'm on that committee also. So that's just my take on it. And I don't know how we're going to solve it, but it's something that need to be looked at. You can look at it and see how it's going to be changed, if you may. But that's just something I want to throw out to you and to the community that way, because we have to be mindful of the community, very mindful of the community with all that's going on with the COVR, with the assessments coming up, taxes going to be raising. So all this is going to be coming up, and they're going to feel that we are throwing them away. So you just got to look at it, how we can kind of balance that. I don't know. I really don't know. Mr. Mayor, I see you had your hands up.
Yeah, so I hear you loud and clear, because adjacent neighborhoods can be impacted. But to take the idea, maybe start with the most needed, apply it where it's needed the most. We Councilmember Mitchell serve on that Central Business District Improvement Commission, and their number one concern seems to be vacant buildings and vacant businesses. So I guess my question to Chip and Ross, from a legal point of view, I know Chip always likes to have things that apply evenly to everybody. Could we narrow this to just the vacant properties and have it for a limited period of time, for like 6 months or a year, and just as a what do you call it, a trial balloon or a pilot thing, and say that for the next year, if any of these 40 properties that are vacant or become vacant would have this special pass on parking, can you limit it that way?
It might be tough, because it seems like that would put those folks at a competitive advantage to the other folks. And I'm just trying to think of a rational basis for doing that. I mean, if you kind of wanted to tinker with it a little bit, I would go with just a very small area to see how that goes. And then expand it from there. I think it's hard sort of within a specified area, absent evidence that, a specific property doesn't really contribute to the parking or within that special area, it'd be hard to just sort of leave properties out to create sort of donut holes within that district.
Right, gotcha.
I'm gonna get Councilman Stackman, and next he haven't had his hands up yet. He have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Question for Councilman Appel. Would this just remove the minimum parking requirements or somehow tinker with the calculation or the formula that we use to give businesses to basically require the parking? For example, maybe it's 15 parking spots, but we tinker with that formula and it's only 5. I do have a constituent right now that's going through this and asking this specific question. So I guess my question is it a removal completely or a tinkering with the formula that we use?
What most of the jurisdictions have done around the country in busy commercial corridors, they've just removed them entirely. But certainly, I don't see any reason why we couldn't look at relaxing certain parking requirements and things of that nature. The one thing that I want to mention is that I would wager the vast majority, if not all, of the buildings on King Street that we're talking about here were built decades, maybe sometimes a century before anybody had ever heard of minimum parking requirements. So we have this built form on King Street, and we're just like the existence of these buildings. To me, when I look at it, when I look at a city, I think there's no reason everything shouldn't be able to be activated. Like it's a, and this goes back pre-COVID. This goes back years before COVID. I mean, the fact that we don't have people living on these second and third and fourth floors, this is affordable housing. This is housing. This is opportunities for people. This is small business. I mean, if you've got a restaurant that's trying to open and it's going to cost you $100,000 or $200,000 to secure parking leases from somebody that owns a lot somewhere, or you're dealing with some national chain, who's winning that battle? I mean, this is let's put it this way. The longer we have minimum parking requirements in place, the longer we have regulatory red tape that's killing small business. It's as simple as that. I get the negative impacts on neighborhoods. We have to find ways to prevent people from illegally parking places. I mean, if they don't have stickers and it's not authorized, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. But we've got a commercial corridor that is struggling big time now, and it was struggling before COVID. Let's all be very real about that. When I go to court, some places around the country, or around the state rather, you drive down these old main streets around the York County and all these other places, and it's sad seeing commercial corridors. And I used to drive through that and always think to myself, man, I am so lucky to live in the city of Charleston, where we got so much going on and all this stuff. But it doesn't happen automatically. We've got to be careful, and we have to make sure we create the ecosystem and the environment where businesses can operate and thrive. And it's not just businesses, it's residential. If I owned a building on King Street and I had, vacant second and third store, floors, and I wanted to put people in there, I'd have to come up with parking. So, and right now there's very expensive limitations to that.
You can reduce or waive requirements, Councilmember Sacker.
I have Jacob Lindsay want to respond to some of those. Jacob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to offer to the members of the committee some research that my staff have done that I would like to make available for you for your next meeting. I did have my staff, this is probably about 2 years ago, look into this issue. They did some amazing research, and what they turned up is that of the 13 different peer communities they looked at, from Savannah to New Orleans to Charlottesville, similar cities in the Southeast, 12 of the 13 have completely eliminated all parking requirements in their city center. The fact that we have minimum parking requirements in our downtown is an antiquated relic of the 1960s, and no other cities do this. And I'd like to offer to you all that research, and I'll make that available to all of you, and we're happy to send that all out so you can look at it for yourselves and draw your own conclusions. But in short, our method of doing things is dated. And I think that you all will draw that same conclusion after you've had a chance to look at the information yourselves. So I'll make that available to you all as you see fit.
Okay, what we can do, oh, Ms. Jackson, before I make my comment.
I just want to support, I think I do remember that Mr. Lindsay had the planning staff do a deep dive in all of this. And I just want to say that, you know, I worked at the National Trust when they had the Main Street program. And basically maybe the mayor was, you know, part of the economic development office at this point, but they came to Charleston. They said, there's really nothing we need to do on Lower King Street because you all are doing it right, except maybe open up your apartment properties to be livable again. And then the other thing that you just mentioned, you know, and I know you're all tired of my analogies from where I came from, but where I came from in Northern Virginia, literally there were no parking requirements and the developers were arguing with the cities to help them build parking because they were worried that they weren't going to have enough parking because parking wasn't being required any longer. So that's a paradigm that we should aspire to get to, where we have developers arguing with us that they will pay for parking as long as we let them build it. You know, it's just, it's a new wave and we need to be on it.
Okay, I would say, Mr. Lindsay, when you send the information out, maybe we can take this up again and see how we can do it. And if we have to do it in a pilot program first to see how it's going to work. And maybe we can do it that way and with the pilot program for 6 months or wherever the case may be, just to see what kind of response we will get. And probably that's something we can take it up. So when Jacob, you can send everyone a copy of that, and we can probably take it up at our next community development meeting.
Great, happy to do that, Mr. Chairman. Will do.
From that point.
Great.
Anyone else have any questions? Other questions? Ms. Mayor, I thought your hands was up. No? Okay. I don't think any other discussion we have to have. I don't think there's nothing else. If nothing else.
Council member?
Yes.
We need to go back to number 1 item.
Oh, I forgot about that. I'm trying to get off. I'm trying to get off of here. Yes, we go back to number 1, old business, and we was waiting for Councilmember Sacrum to come forth, so we can go with discussion on the recommendation of the City Council whether to extend the city ordinance. I can't really see that. So who's going to explain that?
Chip is going to, I think either Chip or Jacob.
Chip, you're on the old business number 1.
Yes, sir. I can do it, or Councilmember Jackson can do it, whichever.
Wherever.
But so this came to City Council and was referred to this committee. I drafted sort of what a proposed ordinance would look like that would eliminate the ability to do cluster developments in the future. Certainly nothing would preclude you all from adopting a new sort of cluster development ordinance. I drafted it so that, and I can pull up what it looks like. Actually, I think you all have it in front of you, but let me see if I can get this thing to work here. Here we go. Draft ordinance. Okay, so, and this is just sort of the general language that I would, you know, I'm not saying I recommend this version, but this would cover the bases as I would see it. So it gives you all a starting off point to begin the discussion. The first portion just sort of sets a sunset date. So cluster developments, no new cluster developments after whatever date it is. That can be the date of first reading because of the pending ordinance doctrine. It could be the date the ordinance is adopted. It could be a later date if you wanted to give people time to get in more applications for cluster developments, which I don't think is the intent of what we're asking. But you know, that you could put whatever date you wanted in there after first reading, starting at first reading by City Council. And I would probably recommend doing it at that point because you don't want, the reason you have the pending ordinance doctrine is preventing a run of non-conforming applications to the planning department. So there were 3 sort of general exceptions I thought about that would be worth considering if you prevented all new cluster developments in the future. One would be there's going to be sites that have a vested right on whatever that sunset date is. two are going to be multi-phase developments where phases in the future, they haven't been specifically detailed or approved, but you have a phase that's vested as a cluster development, and you have documents showing that the other phases therein will be developed as part of a larger cluster development, in which case you probably have some more wiggle room, but you don't necessarily want to just completely unwind the cluster development, because it may be that you're getting the benefits on the late end of that. And the third are currently approved cluster or currently built out cluster developments. A cluster development is sort of like a PUD because it's a site plan that also serves as the zoning. So it's very hard to just rescind it for a property that's already been developed. Because then you have to ask, are these now non-conforming uses? Or, what do I still have to provide the minimum requirements if I build a new house over, can I use the undeveloped portion of the property that I set aside as open space now that I'm not subject to the cluster? How do we move forward? So you would want the cluster development ordinance to stay in place as to those types of developments, so that you're not losing the benefits now that the development has been built out. And I just specify that for those categories, those developments would be, the uses on already developed would be conforming, or to be developed and approved would be conforming. So you wouldn't have any issue of if a building burns down, and you don't rebuild it for 3 years, you can't build it. And then section 2 just says the pending ordinance doctrine applies. Otherwise, it becomes effective upon ratification. And you could take out that the pending ordinance doctrine applies if you wanted to. But this was just to spur the conversation, as Councilmember Jackson had asked. And I think it's kind of up to you all. City Council has designated you all to recommend whether or not to even do it. And then if so, how. So.
Okay. Councilman Gregory, we go open for discussion now. Councilman Gregory?
Yeah, question. How many properties currently would be eligible under the existing cluster ordinance?
I don't have I think Councilmember Jackson had asked planning to prepare those, and I'm not sure if they had time to. I know that. All SR1 developments, I can't remember if it's over 5 acres or 10 acres. So if you've got property zone SR1 and it's more than, I think, 10 contiguous acres anywhere in the city, you qualify. And there's also different other zoning categories. I think the answer to that is a lot. But I can't get any more exact than that.
It's 5 acres, Mr. McQueenie. This ordinance is 5 acres.
I drafted a 10-acre one for the.
Right. 10 acres was the proposed one.
Right.
So we don't know how many properties are eligible at this time?
No, sir.
And if we don't know, but you said you think there are a lot, though. Quite a few.
I mean, 5-acre properties that are contiguous and zoned SR1 and whatever the other zoning categories are, I would think there's a decent amount of acreage in the city, especially in the outer portions of the city, West Ashley and Canoy. Canoy's got development agreements, so it's a little bit different. But I would think there's a good bit of acreage that would qualify.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Jacob Lindsay. I think he might have some answers on that.
Well, I agree with Mr. McQueenie. First of all, that the estimation is a challenging one. We have mapped the number of properties in the city that are 10 acres or more and are also zoned for the cluster ordinance. We have performed that process of mapping those.
Actually, you did for Mr. Lindsay, you did the 5 and the 10-acre properties. So those are the maps that I sent to Christopher today.
You are correct, Councilmember. However, I'd like to point out a very important point here, which is that the majority of developments that take place, which are of any size, are typically not just that one initial property, right? Properties are assembled together to form a larger property. So while we can map a number of 5 or 10 acre parcels that may exist in the city, a developer is going to buy properties and assemble them into a larger tract, thus making them eligible to become cluster developments. So that is the thing that makes it very, very difficult to estimate, is the ability of a property owner to assemble them into larger properties. So just a key data point that I'd like to introduce into the discussion.
Any other questions?
Chairman Mitchell, I would like to add to Mr. Lindsay's point about that. I mean, I do think that when I looked at the maps that Ms. Stuber and Mr. Morgan created a month or more ago, that is, and we know this to be true anecdotally, that a lot of where we have seen cluster development have come from unincorporated county properties that were annexed in and then had the opportunity to be developed as cluster subdivisions. So it is very challenging, but the maps themselves, I think, are informative, because basically I am trying to eliminate what I see, and just looking at my District 12 on James Island as an example. But now that I've seen the maps and talked to the other, people that are following land use around the boroughs, that really what is left for redevelopment now as single family subdivisions are on the either the combination of special flood protection areas and or the low-lying areas that the Dutch Dialogues is demonstrating to us are in the elevation zones that really need to be dealt with under a whole new way of doing zoning once we finish the city plan, as well as in the places where we have the least opportunity to have better commuting transportation. So we're incentivizing new construction development in places where we might not be able to sustain it. And we certainly don't want to encourage it, because what we're going to be looking for in the future way of doing zoning and encouraging the kind of homeownership and affordable housing will be in the high, dry, and connected parts of Charleston. So that's my motive in terms of taking the time out from what was a good tool maybe 10, 12 years ago when it was introduced to the city to go along with our annexation game plan and the goals that we had to grow the city boundaries out into beyond the peninsula. But it's just like y'all were talking about, incentivizing or requiring parking. It's really not a tool that smart communities that have sprawl around the ring of their core areas are still nurturing. So that's my game plan for why to just take this off the table, then do our comp plan, then come back with some zoning that's going to be comprehensive and all fit together to obtain the goals that we're going to try to achieve based on our comprehensive planning. That's where I am. I know that Dr. Revis, who is a constituent of Councilmember Gregory and a resident of the Central Park Basin that's under very, proactive study now for flooding control improvements. She's been talking to Councilmember Gregory and to all the rest of us that represent neighborhoods on James Island to really be a proponent of making this move to eliminate the cluster opportunities that we still have on our books. So she sent a very cogent memo today. I don't know if to Councilmember Gregory, and actually I think she misunderstood that Councilmember Waring was the chairman of this committee, so she addressed it. So Councilmember Gregory, I don't know if you had time to receive it and really see it. It's very well stated, but it's not anything new in terms of her. I'm gonna
call Councilman Gregory.
Yeah, I'm quite aware of Dr. Revis's issues, and I think many of them are quite relevant. I just want to make sure that I understand what's going on. I thought that at one point we were trying to replace this ordinance with something else. What did we call it? A conservation ordinance? Are we then saying that when we do this, even that proposed notice would go out of the, will be gone?
You could adopt that at any point. Yes, Member Gregory, the new ordinance, that wouldn't preclude you from adopting a new ordinance like the conservation development. The conservation development requires 10 contiguous acres. And you all may know, but you know, the whole purpose of a conservation or a cluster development is if you own 100 acres of land and you know you can build 1,000 homes, instead of building 1,000 homes on that 100 acres, you build them on like 10 acres, and then you have 90 acres of open space and good drainage areas and those kind of things. The conservation development is a little bit different, and incidentally, the conservation and the cluster ordinance applies to the lowest density based zoning districts in the city, because the idea is you want more space between development in those areas. So it's more of creating a smaller urban area and a larger, just undeveloped area. But those are only on properties that are, you know, you'd have 4 units per acre allowed on in base zoning. The difference between the current ordinance and the conservation ordinance, the biggest difference is really affordable housing. Number one, it has to be 10 acres contiguous, but number two, it also has to provide a certain number of affordable housing, and you can do a little bit denser types of residential uses, and the affordable housing doesn't, as drafted, it wouldn't apply to your density limits. So that would be the biggest difference between the two, but it would not affect the pending ordinance. I don't even know if it has received a first reading on the conservation district. This would not affect that at all.
Mr. Mayor, you had your hands up?
Thanks for that.
Mr. Mayor, you had your hands up? Anyone else?
No, I think I was just rubbing my chin.
Oh, okay.
But I will ask a question, I guess, if you don't mind. So tell me the status of the conservation category you were just referring to. Is that all? I didn't think we had gotten that accomplished yet, but I might be thinking of something
Would you
else.
call on Christopher Morgan, please? I see that he's on the meeting.
We'll call on him in a few minutes.
Christopher Morgan,
We're
I
going to
think.
call on him in a few minutes. I'm going to read to the mayor for this, and then I'll ask Christopher, come on. Mayor, do you want Christopher Morgan to come and answer that question?
Either him or Jacob, whoever could
Either
answer
one.
that question. I thought we were going to make changes to the cluster ordinance that would make it a new name.
Exactly.
Was it the conservation ordinance?
That's what we thought. So we have to get this clear. We have to get this. We have to really get
We
this.
hadn't gotten that accomplished yet, have we?
Not yet. Jacob, Christopher, who is going to answer?
I'll just briefly reply to that, and then Christopher can add anything that he needs to. Mayor and members of the committee, significant amount of work was done by staff as well as members of other departments, including stormwater. They also engaged members of the community, and they have drafted a conservation ordinance, which is a new version of the old cluster ordinance. It corrects many of the problems, including making sure that it performs at the very highest standards in terms of stormwater handling. In my opinion, the conservation ordinance draft does what the cluster ordinance was always intended to do, but it really does it well. Now, with that said, that ordinance is drafted, but it has not been adopted. So it is ready to go, and a lot of work has been put into that. However, at the moment, that is currently on the shelf and would be something that you all could take up if you saw fit. But we've, I think, collectively decided to shelve it for the moment.
And I would say I don't think it makes sense to just replace the cluster ordinance with the conservation ordinance because of what I just said earlier about the developments that have already begun development under cluster zoning. That it's not necessarily going to make, you're going to have to translate rights from a development that started under one set of rights into a development that now allows a second set of rights, and that doesn't make sense. So it would make a lot more sense to actually repeal the cluster. And you wouldn't have to do it now. You could wait until the conservation ordinance gets further along. But it makes sense to repeal it, as I just said, and then adopt the conservation ordinance as well. They're not mutually exclusive at all.
Does Christopher have anything to say? Christopher Morgan, are you on the line? Do you have anything else to say?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just that the conservation ordinance did get to a planning commission agenda item, and then they asked to have it deferred for more study, and we have not gone further with it because we've been occupied with the comprehensive plan, and the thought was that the comprehensive plan was going to come up with concepts that could further enhance the conservation ordinance.
Okay. All right. So I think with this particular item, I think we might have to probably defer till our next meeting till we get all this information in place. I don't know what we need to do on it, if we have to vote on it tonight or this deferred, because I think some people are still confused.
I think we should vote on this tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr.
It's
Chairman,
our prerogative. I'm just sharing.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're all aware that the big push for this is from a cluster development that we've been struggling with, that came forward, that you know, has been very unpopular, and there are not a lot of cluster developments that have come forward in the city, and the conservation ordinance is so much more desirable. If what Chip is saying is so, and I take it as being so, that it makes more sense to go ahead and get rid of the one and come back and bring the other on, I would propose that we accept this motion and move it on forward and just have a hiatus on cluster developments until we can get our new conservation one done.
I second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. It was moved, approved, and second. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Councilmember Waring has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see him. I'm sorry. Councilman Waring, before I hit him.
Yeah, let me ask you a question.
You can come and speak afterwards.
Yeah, well, yeah, the motion's on the floor, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, so what I wanted to ask was, does this involve SR1?
All right.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good.
And this was, I assume you want the sunset date to be the pending ordinance date so that basically we can't accept cluster developments after October 13th.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to vote.
Okay. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Opposes? Up in the sky? I don't know. But, anyway, so we'll have that was approved. So that'll approve and go to the city council.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I mean, all right. Any other things? Any other business we need to bring before we are brought to adjourn?
Councilmember, there are no other items at this time.
Okay.
Move for adjournment.
All right. I'm good with that. It's all adjourned. Anybody else have anything else to say? Councilman Sacre, do you have something else? No?
Well.
If we adjourn.